All right, let's talk about the graphs of the tangent function. So in this examples, we're going to go over how to find the period and how to find the asymptotes. Okay. So before, when we're using sine and cosine, for period we're using 2 pi over b. For tangent, we're going to use period equals just pi over b, right? So for this first one, here our b here is 1. So that means our period is going to be pi over 1, which is just pi. So we should see a period every pi units. Okay, for the second one, remember this negative, all it's going to do is flip it over. So that's not going to affect the period. The 2 is going to horizontally stretch it. So that doesn't affect the period either. So this 4 is the one that affects it. So we're going to use our formula here, pi over b. So here our period equals pi over 4. And you can't simplify it here. So there's your period. So this is part A. Okay, so this is the most important when you're looking at a graph. So we're going to do these backwards in the next step. And we're going to go from the graph, we're going to examine the period, and then we're going to get to the equation. All right, let's take a look at part B, the asymptotes. Okay, so for the asymptotes, remember our tangent is our y value over our x value. So we're going to have asymptotes when our x value is 0, when you have a 0 in the denominator. So here we're going to have asymptotes at pi over 2 and at 3 pi over 2. So your formula for this one, it's going to be in the middle of this. So remember it was pi over 2. So for your asymptotes, you're going to have asymptotes at pi over 2b, right? So in the case for number 3, we're going to have it at pi over 2 times 1 is your asymptotes, right? And then this one, you're going to have your asymptotes at every pi over 2 times 4. So this is pi over 8. Right? So it's going to be at pi over 8, and then it's going to repeat at every pi over 4. This one's going to be at pi over 2, and it's going to repeat at every pi. Okay, so that's how you get your period and asymptotes. So now let's look at some graphs backwards. So let's look at the regular graph of tangent. So for this example, we just did it. We said our period, our b is 1. We got, pi over 1, which is just pi. And for your asymptotes, we're going to have these at pi over 2b. So this one is going to be at pi over 2. Okay. So when we graph this, remember I said the most important part is your period. So your period, notice that when we start our tangent, our y over our x, 0 over 1 is just 0. This is actually going to start at 0, okay? And then it's going to repeat at pi. So that's all I'm looking for when I'm looking at the graphs backwards. It's going to have asymptote here at pi over 2. And then this is going to repeat every pi, so it's going to repeat here. And it's going to have asymptote again in the middle at 3 pi over 2. Okay. And then when you plug in the graphs, it's going to, so I'm going to do it here first. It's going to look something like this. Right? It's going to repeat here. And it's going to repeat here. So usually they put this second asymptote here at negative pi over 2. So this is how you graph regular y equals tangent theta. So if I was just looking at the graph, I would look for where these start over here. I know that from here to here is pi. So I know that my period is pi. So that means this is going to be a 1, because remember your period equals pi over b, right? So if our period is pi here, that means our b has to be 1, right? So then I know this is going to be